Today on Live with Lori, Congressman Bill Posey is helping cook Pollo Marengo. Lori's dish is out of this world, but she wants to know what Congressman Posey thinks about our space program. Find out now on Live with Lori.
Hi, and welcome back to Live with Lori, where we do cook up political food for thought. And today we're cooking with Congressman Bill Posey. I'm so glad you could join us today. We're making Pollo Marengo, and on the last segment we were talking about why this came about. And it came about when I was in college, because we didn't have a lot of money. We were in college, and we all pooled our resources to make dinner, and this is what we could afford. And you know, when you talk about pooling resources, because we are on the Space Coast, let's talk about the Space Center. Let's talk about NASA. And while you're talking about that, if you could get some garlic and put some garlic in there, and I'll continue chopping, and we'll talk about the Space Center, because I know that's near and dear to everybody's heart.
Yes, it is. Unfortunately, America is yielding the lead in space to Russia and China. As you recall, there was going to be a 3-year gap or transition period between the space shuttle and the Constellation program. And when the president was on the Space Coast, he said that he would close that gap.
Right.
Well, actually, he eliminated the Constellation program, so the gap is eternal. Now, a lot of people, even on the Space Coast, don't really understand the ramifications of that. Originally, under Bush, the plan was to pay the Russians $20 million for 3 years to fly our astronauts back and forth to the International Space Station. However, that cost now has escalated to $60 million per astronaut, and the time period when we may be ready to have a rocket to take our own people back and forth to the space station is undetermined. So it can be 15 years, as long as 15 years that we can't even access our own space station. Now, a lot of people don't understand the real importance of our dominance in space, and it really wasn't apparent to me either until I went to Israel. Always wanted to go to Israel.
Israel, really?
Yeah, and they had a group going over there, and I pay my own way, by the way. I did not go on taxpayers' money. I wrote a check for Katie and I to go. It was $16,000 for us to go over there and really work your butts off on what they call a Cordell. But the point of this story is, we went up to the Golan Heights, and I never could figure out why Israel would not negotiate giving the Golan Heights back to talk peace, because you see pictures of it. It's a big, ugly rock, no water there, nothing is ever going to grow there, nobody's ever going to live there. And what's the big deal? Until you set foot on the Golan Heights, and it was a cloudy day.
No.
And on this cloudy day, you could look across the Sea of Galilee, a little strip of land, that was Israel, and on the other side, all blue, that was the Mediterranean. On a cloudy day, they say on a clear day, you can see Tel Aviv. And the best description of that I heard was Dr. Rowe, Phil Rowe, a physician that represents Tennessee. He said, golly, you could make a D- in rocket launching 101, and from up here, you could hit anywhere down there you wanted, and they couldn't even see you. And that, Lori, is classic description of military high ground.
Right.
Well, space is America and the free world's military high ground. Most people think that wars are just fought with bullets and bombs, but we're in an economic war for our life in this country right now, and control of space is important for us in many ways. As you mentioned before the show, how could people live without their cell phones and their laptops, without weather reports, GPS, all that, you know?
Yeah.
And so they don't stop to think that they couldn't even use a credit card if it wasn't for the space program, because that's all satellite linked. And they say, well, I'll just use cash. Well, you can't make a bank withdrawal, you know, if we don't have our satellites, because that's all satellite linked. And so about 6 months ago, 5-6 months ago, you read in the paper that there was a threat that the International Space Station may be struck by space debris. Remember?
Right,
you know, everywhere, yeah. And I asked people, do you remember where that space debris came from? And while they're thinking about it, I remind them, it came from China. China, instead of letting their big old satellite burn up on re-entry to the atmosphere, they took target practice on it and blew it to smithereens. And so those thousands of pieces of space debris that the Chinese shot down their own satellite is what was endangering the International Space Station. And of course, people say, well, why would they shoot their own satellite down? And
well, want to see if it works.
Target practice.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. That's more than I ever knew. What I did while you were talking is I added tomatoes and balsamic vinegar, some olives, some roasted red peppers, and some white wine. And of course, you added the garlic. We want to just heat that back up to temperature, and then we're going to put the chicken back in.
I missed a piece of garlic. I'll knock that thing out right here.
Okay, you just put that in. You're going to nestle this chicken right in here.
No such thing as too much garlic in here, right?
Nope, you never have too much garlic.
How are we doing?
All right, that's perfect.
Okay.
All right, now make sure that when you cook this, you have it in a pan that you can put in the oven, because that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to stick it in the oven. Okay, we're going to cover this with foil, and then we're going to put it in a 325-degree oven for about an hour, or maybe a little more, depending on how big your pieces of chicken are. And then you're going to have some fabulous, fabulous chicken. Can you open that oven for me?
Sure. Top?
Yep. You just set the whole pan and everything right in there. Just like that. And when we come back, we'll be tasting our chicken merengue and asking Bill our feature question. So stay tuned.
Things are starting to heat up in the kitchen, but is it the Pollo Marengo or Lori's feature question that gets Congressman Bill Posey dancing? Find out when we return.